Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to start by closing your eyes, unless you're driving, obviously, and just picture a meadow. A standard, idyllic patch of nature.
Hmm.
Maybe it's the edge of a forest. You look at it, and what do you see? You see the sun shining, maybe a little rain falling.
Right, the basics.
You see the grass growing because of that sun and rain. You see a rabbit eating the grass. Maybe a hawk is circling overhead, hunting the rabbit. It feels intuitive, right?
It feels linear.
Exactly. Linear. It feels like a clean chain of cause and effect. A plus B equals C. The sun feeds the grass feeds the rabbit. Simple.
That is the postcard view of nature. It's comforting, it's tidy, and it fits very neatly into how we human beings like to organize the world.
We love a good story.
We love linear narratives.
Mm.
We like to think that if we tweak one variable, we can predict exactly what happens to the next link in that chain.
Precisely, the postcard version. But today, we're ripping up the postcard. We are looking at a stack of sources today that suggests that cause and effect view isn't just a little bit simplified. It is fundamentally, maybe even dangerously misleading.
That's a good way to put it.
We have a set of sources that paint a picture of nature as this massive, vibrating, tangled web of invisible chemistry, terrifyingly complex mathematics, and these four-level food chains where a single beetle can change the shape of a plant without ever touching it.
It is a bit of a journey today. We're going to traverse scales that don't usually talk to each other. We're going from the global atmosphere down to microscopic root systems.
And then zooming into Costa Rica?
Then zooming into the behavior of ants in Costa Rica. And finally, we're going to end up in the abstract world of high-dimensional geometry and tensor calculus.
It is a journey. And honestly, looking at the stack, I was a little intimidated. We've got the massive IPCC 6th Assessment Report on climate change, specifically the impacts and vulnerability section.
A monster of a report.
A monster. Then we have a classic ecological paper on how humans have basically hacked the nitrogen cycle. We have a field study from Costa Rica involving ants and beetles that reads like a murder mystery. And then, then we have this dense paper on tensor decompositions and higher order ecological networks.
Which I promise is not as scary as it sounds. It's dense, yes, but it's a necessary piece of the puzzle.
I'm holding you to that, because when I saw tensor train decomposition next to a study about beetle larvae, my brain tried to leave the room.
Yeah.
But the mission today is to connect these dots. We want to see how the global chemical changes we're making, the stuff from the IPCC and the nitrogen papers, actually crash into the mathematical stability of the ecosystems we rely on.
Precisely. And the math, that dense paper you mentioned, it's really just a language. It's a language that's been designed to describe the complexity that the biologists are finding out there in the rainforest.
So you can't have one without the other.
You really can't. If you don't have the math, the biology is just a collection of fascinating anecdotes. If you don't have the biology, the math is just abstract numbers. Today, we bridge them.
Okay, so we're going to act as translators. We're going from the chemistry to the bugs and end up at the math that tries to predict the future. Let's start with the big backdrop, the stage that all of this is happening on. We have the IPCC 6th Assessment Report, specifically the contribution from Working Group 2.
Right, and this report, Climate Change 2022, Impacts, Adaptation, Vulnerability, is significant because it really shifts the focus a bit. We often talk about climate change just in terms of working group, the physical science.
Yeah, the parts per million of CO2, how many degrees Celsius hotter it will get.
Exactly, that's the physics.
Yeah.
But this report is a systemic assessment of impacts. It's about the messy, complicated reality of what happens when those degrees hit actual ecosystems in human communities.
It's massive. I mean, looking at the table of contents alone, it covers everything. Chapter 2 is terrestrial and freshwater ecosystems. Chapter 6 is cities and infrastructure.
And then they break it down by region: Africa, Asia, Australasia, small islands. It feels like there isn't a single square inch of the planet that isn't analyzed here.
No corner is untouched. But what struck me wasn't just the list of damages, the litany of bad news. It was the tone regarding resilience.
That is the point. The key word in the title that really stands out to me is vulnerability. The report emphasizes that nature has limits. There are adaptation limits.
What does that mean exactly, an adaptation limit?
Well, we tend to think nature is infinitely resilient, that it will just bounce back, or, animals will just move north, or ecosystems will just shift.
Right, it'll figure it out.
It'll figure it out. But the IPCC is saying, no, there are hard walls here. There are points of no return.
Can we dig into that? What is a hard limit? Is that like, it's too hot so I'm uncomfortable, or is it, it's too hot so I die?
It's the latter. It is absolutely the latter. They distinguish between soft limits, where adaptation is possible but maybe we lack the money or the technology, and hard limits, where the biological or social system simply cannot function anymore, period.
Okay, so give me an example of a hard limit.
The clearest one is coral reefs. Above 1.5 degrees Celsius of sustained warming, we hit a hard physiological wall for many, many coral species. They don't just get stressed, they bleach and die because the symbiotic algae inside them gets expelled.
The very mechanism of their life breaks down.
Their internal symbiosis just collapses. Or look at trees in a severe drought. There's a physical limit to how much suction a tree can apply to pull water from dry soil. At a certain point, the water column inside the tree's xylem literally snaps. It's called embolism. That is a hard limit. The tree can't just try harder.
It's the difference between bending and breaking, and the report makes it clear that we're approaching those breaking points in multiple systems all at the same time.
Exactly. And it sets the context for everything else we're discussing today. Think of the climate, the temperature, the rainfall patterns as the theater building itself.
Okay.
If the theater is on fire, or if the roof is leaking and the walls are crumbling, the play going on stage is going to be fundamentally altered. You can't have a normal performance in a collapsing building.
So the IPCC report tells us the theater is definitely getting hotter, more volatile, and its structural integrity is failing. That's our baseline. But now let's look at what's happening on the stage itself, because while we're all watching the carbon dioxide levels and the temperature gauges, there's another element that we've completely rewired: nitrogen.
The invisible overload.
Yes, we have this paper from the Ecological Society of America, Human Alteration of the Global Nitrogen Cycle. And I have to admit, I vaguely remembered the nitrogen cycle from high school biology. It was a circle diagram, had some arrows pointing to roots in the sky.
We all saw that diagram.
But I didn't realize it was this big of a deal. I mean, we hear about carbon nonstop. Why is nitrogen flying under the radar?
It is arguably the most significant chemical alteration humans have made to the planet, even rivaling carbon in terms of pure magnitude of change. And to understand why, you have to go back to the before picture. You have to understand just how scarce usable nitrogen used to be.
The before picture. Okay, so the air we're breathing right now is 78% nitrogen, right? It's everywhere.
It is everywhere, but it's useless. That atmospheric nitrogen is two nitrogen atoms triple bonded together. You can write it as N with 3 lines and then another N. That triple bond is one of the strongest chemical bonds in nature. It is incredibly tough to break.
So we're surrounded by it, but can't use it.
Most life on Earth, plants, animals, us, we cannot break that bond. We are, in a very real sense, swimming in an ocean of nitrogen, but we can't drink it. We can't use it to build proteins or DNA.
It's like being thirsty in the middle of the ocean. Water everywhere, nor any drop to drink.
That is the perfect analogy. In the natural world, before humans got deeply involved, there were only 2 main ways that bond got broken or fixed, so life could use it.
Okay, what were they?
One was lightning. The sheer thermal energy of a lightning bolt, we're talking 30,000 kelvins, hotter than the surface of the sun, can rip those atoms apart.
Wow.
But that accounts for maybe, less than 10 teragrams of nitrogen a year globally?
And a teragram is 1 million metric tons. So lightning provides just a tiny sprinkle.
A sprinkle. The rest, all the heavy lifting, was done by specialized bacteria and blue-green algae, what we call cyanobacteria. They have a special enzyme called nitrogenase that can, very slowly and carefully, break that bond.
The real workhorses of the planet.
Absolutely. Historically, they fixed maybe 90 to 140 teragrams a year globally.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was the planetary budget for new, usable nitrogen. Life was limited by it. If a forest wanted to grow, it had to wait for the bacteria to make some nitrogen available. It was a scarcity economy.
And then we humans came along and said, we can hack this. We didn't want to wait for the bacteria.
And we did.
Yeah.
The paper outlines the 3 main ways we broke the cycle. And the numbers here are just staggering. We have effectively doubled the rate of nitrogen entering the land-based cycle.
Doubled. Say that again. We are doing as much work as all the bacteria and all the lightning storms on Earth combined.
Yes. And it happened very, very quickly, mostly in the last century. The first culprit, and the biggest one by far, is industrial fertilizer, the Haber-Bosch process.
Which was developed in Germany during World War I, wasn't it? Something about explosives.
Correct. Fritz Haber and Carl Bosch. It's a classic dual-use technology. They figured out how to use massive amounts of pressure and heat to force atmospheric nitrogen to bond with hydrogen, creating ammonia. It's a brute force attack on that triple bond using fossil fuel energy.
And since the 1940s, its use has just skyrocketed.
It's grown exponentially. The paper states it's adding about 80 teragrams of new reactive nitrogen a year. That single source alone rivals the entire natural background rate.
That is just wild. We invented a way to print food, basically. We turn air and natural gas into fertilizer. But we didn't stop there. The paper mentions legume crops.
Right. We figured out which plants were good at this naturally and decided to plant them everywhere.
Soybeans, peas, alfalfa.
Exactly. We planted vast monocultures of these crops. Legumes are special because they host those nitrogen-fixing bacteria in little nodules on their roots. They're biological fertilizer factories.
Yeah.
By covering millions of hectares of the planet in soy and alfalfa, we've added another separate factory of nitrogen fixation, about 40 teragrams a year.
Okay, so that's two. What's the third one? Fossil fuels. How does that work?
Two ways. First, coal and oil contain nitrogen that was locked away in geological formations for millions of years. It's ancient plant matter. When we burn them, we release it back into the active cycle.
So we're unlocking old nitrogen.
And we're also creating new reactive nitrogen. The heat of combustion in a car engine or a power plant is so intense it can fix some atmospheric nitrogen directly, just like lightning does, but on a massive continuous scale. That's another 20 teragrams or so per year.
So we flooded the market with nitrogen. We've taken the scarcity economy and turned it into an abundance economy, which, on the surface, that sounds good, right? More fertilizer means more plants, more food for a growing population.
To a point. But remember those adaptation limits from the IPCC. We are hitting them with nitrogen. The consequences of this overload are cascading everywhere. This is where the chemistry gets really interesting and scary.
Let's start with the soil itself. The paper talks about nitrogen saturation and acidification. This part really scared me, the idea that the soil itself can lose its fertility because of too much nutrient. How does that work?
It's a paradox, isn't it? You add nitrogen, usually in the form of ammonium, which plants love, but if you add more than the plants and microbes can immediately use, the soil bacteria get to work and convert it into nitrate. That's NO3 with a negative charge.
Okay, so it changes form. Why is that a problem?
It's a problem because nitrate is negatively charged. And here's the kicker. Soil particles, the clay and organic matter, are also generally negatively charged. And what do charges do?
They repel.
They repel. So the nitrate doesn't stick to the soil. It's slippery. It washes away with the very next rain.
Okay, so we're losing the nitrogen we paid for. That's wasteful, but is it damaging?
It is deeply damaging because of what the nitrate takes with it on its way out. As that negatively charged nitrate leaches out of the soil profile, it needs to maintain electrical neutrality. So it drags positively charged ions with it.
Like what?
It drags out calcium,
Yep.
magnesium, potassium.
Wait, that's the good stuff. That's the stuff plants actually need to build their structures.
Exactly. These are the essential mineral nutrients, the buffering cations that keep the soil from becoming acidic. So you end up with soil that is acidified, rich in nitrogen, but stripped bare of the calcium and potassium that trees and other plants need for long-term health.
So the trees might look green and leafy for a while because of all the nitrogen.
But their roots are starving for calcium, their cell walls are weak, making them brittle and susceptible to frost, to wind damage, to insect attacks. You get this phenomenon of forest decline, even in areas that look lush.
And this must completely change what can grow there? The paper had this case study from the Netherlands, the heathlands.
Yes, a classic gut-wrenching example of biodiversity loss.
Yeah.
The heathlands were these beautiful, species-rich ecosystems that were specifically adapted to low nitrogen conditions. You had all these unique mosses, heathers, delicate orchids plants that knew how to survive on a tight budget.
And then suddenly it's like a fire hose of nitrogen is turned on them.
Exactly. From atmospheric deposition, from industry and agriculture, from fertilizer runoff, you dump what is essentially unlimited nitrogen on them. And what happens?
The grasses take over.
The fast-growing, nitrogen-hungry grasses just explode. They outcompete everything else. They grow tall. They shade out the small, slow-growing orchids. They suck up all the water. The unique species just disappear. The heathland becomes a species-poor, homogeneous grassland. You've lost the complexity. You've replaced a complex ecosystem with a simple one.
And the nitrogen doesn't stop in the soil. It keeps moving. It goes into the rivers, into the estuaries, and this is where we get the dead zones.
Eutrophication. It's the same principle. The nitrogen that leaches from the farmland becomes a super fertilizer for algae in the water.
So you get these massive algae blooms.
Explosive blooms. The water turns green or brown, but then the algae die and sink to the bottom, and the decomposition of all that dead algae by bacteria sucks all the oxygen out of the water.
Creating these anoxic or hypoxic zones.
Med zones. Fish die, crabs die, anything that can't swim away fast enough suffocates.
Yeah.
The Baltic Sea, the Chesapeake Bay, the Gulf of Mexico off the mouth of the Mississippi, these are huge areas of our oceans that are suffocating every summer. We're essentially terraforming our coastal waters into anaerobic zones.
And if that wasn't enough, there's the direct human health angle. The paper mentioned blue baby syndrome.
Methemoglobinemia. It's horrifying. If high levels of nitrates get into drinking water, which they often do in agricultural areas, they can interfere with the blood's ability to carry oxygen, particularly in infants.
How?
It converts hemoglobin, the molecule that carries oxygen, to methemoglobin, which can't. The baby's blood literally can't pick up enough oxygen, and they can turn blue from asphyxiation. It's a direct toxicity.
So let's just pause and look at the board here. We have the IPCC saying the whole theater is shaking, the climate is volatile. We have the nitrogen paper saying we have doubled the chemical inputs, acidifying soils, changing entire plant communities, and choking the oceans. We are hacking the system at a global scale.
We're changing the fundamental parameters of the simulation, if you want to think of it that way. We are turning the knobs for temperature and nutrient availability to 11.
But what does that actually do to the animals living in it? Not just in a generic, it's too hot way, but in the specific way they interact with each other. This brings us to our third source, the story from Costa Rica.
Yes.
This is the paper, Trophic Cascades in a Complex Terrestrial Community.
This is where we zoom right in. We leave the global charts and the satellite images, and we go to the wet forest floor of the La Selva Biological Station. It is hot, it is humid, it is incredibly noisy with life.
I love this study because it feels like a drama. It's so tangible. We have a clear cast of characters. Let's introduce them. First, the plant, Piper seneclitum.
It's a shrub. It lives in the understory, the dimly lit area below the main forest canopy. It's basically a solar panel trying to catch whatever scraps of light make it through the canopy. It's a tough existence.
Then we have the herbivores. The paper lists them, caterpillars, bugs, katydids, basically a bunch of things that want to eat the Piper plant's leaves.
The enemies of the plant. If they eat too much leaf area, the plant can't photosynthesize. It dies.
But the plant has a mercenary, a bodyguard, the phytobicornis ant.
This is a beautiful example of mutualism. It's a deal. The plant provides a home. It has these hollow stems and petioles that are perfect for ant colonies to live in.
So it's a living apartment building.
It is. And it even provides catering. The plant produces these little lipid and protein snacks called food bodies, specifically for the ants to eat. In exchange, the ants are the bodyguards. They patrol the leaves 204/7.
And if they find a caterpillar?
They attack it, they kill it, and drive it off. If they find insect eggs on a leaf, they meticulously clean them off. They are a standing army.
It's a classic protection racket. I give you housing and food. You break the legs of anyone who messes with my business.
That's a very good way of putting it.
But then there's the villain, or, I guess from its perspective, the hero. The top predator, the Tarsobanus laterno beetle.
Specifically, the beetle larvae. This is where it gets complicated and so interesting. This beetle is a predator, but it doesn't eat the plant, and it doesn't eat the herbivores that eat the plant.
It eats the ants.
It eats the bodyguards, it invades the plant stems, and hunts the ant brood, the ant larvae, and pupae.
It's a stealth intruder that targets the security force.
Right, so this is what ecologists get excited about. This is a 4 trophic level system. You have the plant at level 1, the herbivore that eats it at level 2, the ant that eats the herbivore at level 3, and the beetle that eats the ant at level 4.
A 4-level chain. And the study wanted to see what happens if you mess with the top of that chain. If you add more beetles to the system, what happens to the plant way down at the bottom?
Traditional ecology for a long time looked at bottom-up control. More sun and rain and nutrients bottom factors means more plants. It means more animals. It's very intuitive.
Makes sense.
But this study was looking for a top-down cascade. Does the predator at the top dictate the health of the world at the bottom?
So they did this experiment. They manually added beetle larvae to these plants, which, by the way, sounds incredibly tedious. Finding tiny beetle larvae and moving them into hollow plant stems in the middle of a rainforest.
Field ecology is not for the impatient. It's meticulous, painstaking work. They had to monitor these plants constantly, counting ants, measuring leaf area. But the results were just crystal clear.
What happened?
When they added the beetle, the ant population collapsed. There was a 5-fold reduction in the number of ants on those plants.
Okay, so the bodyguards are gone. The security force has been decimated by the beetles' special ops team.
And with the bodyguards gone, the herbivores, the caterpillars, and the katydids realized the coast was clear. It was an open buffet. They multiplied.
And with the herbivores partying, the plant gets eaten.
Precisely. Herbivory, the amount of leaf being eaten, increased nearly threefold. The total leaf area of the shrub was reduced by half.
Half. The plant lost half its solar panels.
All because of a beetle that never took a single bite of a leaf.
This is the cascade. The beetle controls the ant, which controls the herbivore, which controls the health of the plant. If you change the top, the bottom feels it hard.
And what's so fascinating is that the researchers realized this completely challenges our simple assumptions. We often look at a green patch of forest and think, oh, it's green, it's healthy. But that health isn't a passive state. It's being actively maintained second by second by these invisible interactions.
So the greenness is a negotiated truce between all these players.
A very fragile one. If you remove that beetle or add too many, the plant suffers or thrives in ways you wouldn't predict just by looking at the soil and the sun.
The paper even showed that this affects nearby plants, right? It's not just the one plant that gets infested.
Yes. It creates a mosaic of effects in the understory. Some plants are protected, some are being devoured. This is the definition of complexity. It's not just A affects B, it's A affects B, which changes how B affects C, which ultimately determines if D survives.
And this connects right back to our earlier points. I can't help but try and weave them together. Imagine we're standing there in La Selva. The IPCC report says the average temperature is rising. Maybe the beetle larvae are very sensitive to heat and can't survive.
Okay, so the beetle dies out.
The beetle dies, so the ant population explodes, and the plant is super protected and thrives. Great. But wait, the nitrogen report says we're dumping nitrogen fertilizer from the atmosphere. Maybe that fertilizer makes the herbivores breed twice as fast as the ants can possibly eat them.
Or maybe the nitrogen favors a different plant, a vine that chokes out the piper shrub altogether.
Exactly. You start to see the problem. We have all these variables changing at once, pushing and pulling on this delicate web.
And this is the question that kept nagging me while I was rereading all of this. How on earth do we predict what happens next? Because if we double the nitrogen, does that help the plant grow faster than the beetle can kill the ant? Or does the climate change kill the beetle, saving the ant, but then the excess nitrogen makes the weeds choke the plant? It seems mathematically impossible to model.
It is incredibly difficult. It is the holy grail of ecology predictive stability. And this brings us to the final and most intimidating paper in our stack.
For the math paper?
The math paper on complexity of stability analysis in higher order ecological networks through tensor decompositions.
But don't worry, we're going to break this down.
Please, because I saw the word hypergraph and Jacobian matrix, and I immediately needed another coffee.
Let's start with the problem they're trying to solve. The traditional way we model ecosystems is with something called the Generalized Lotka-Volterra model, or GLV.
Which is pairwise? Is that the right word?
Exactly. It assumes interactions are pairwise. A eats B, or A competes with B. It's like trying to understand a party by only listening to a series of one-on-one conversations. You look at how the wolf affects the rabbit, then you look at how the rabbit affects the grass. You sum up all these private conversations to try and understand the whole room.
But the Costa Rica story wasn't a series of one-on-one conversations. The beetle changes the relationship between the ant and the plant.
Precisely. That is a higher-order interaction. It's not a conversation between two people, it's a dinner party. The dynamic between two people at the table changes completely depending on who else is sitting there.
Like how I act differently with you when my boss is in the room versus when it's just us.
Exactly. That is a higher-order interaction.
Yeah.
In ecology, species A affects species B, but the way it affects it depends entirely on the presence or density of species C. The beetle changes the rules for the ant. Or maybe a specific soil fungus changes how a plant absorbs the nitrogen we're dumping on it.
So the standard A eats B math just doesn't work. It's too simple.
It's insufficient. It misses the magic. It misses the specific contingent mechanisms that hold the web together. We need a model that can handle A eats B, but only if C is absent. This leads to the higher-order generalized Lotka-Volterra model, or HOGLV.
HOGLV. It sounds like a spell from Harry Potter.
It's a powerful spell, but it comes with a curse. The curse of dimensionality.
That sounds appropriately dramatic.
It is a computational nightmare.
Yeah.
Think about it. If you just have pairwise interactions lines connecting two dots, and you add more species, the number of lines you have to track grows, but it's manageable. It's quadratic.
Yeah.
But if you have to track groups of 3 or groups of 4, the number of possible combinations explodes exponentially.
It's the difference between connecting every pair of people in a stadium versus connecting every possible group of 3 people in that stadium.
Yeah.
The number just becomes astronomical, instantly.
You've got it. If you have an ecosystem with, say, just 50 species, which is tiny, and you want to model fourth-order interactions like our beetle-ant-bug plant chain,
Yeah.
you are suddenly dealing with millions and millions of parameters. The computer literally runs out of memory. It crashes. You can't simulate it.
So we discovered nature is this incredibly complex dinner party, but our math was too heavy to carry the load.
Until now, or at least we're getting closer. That's what this paper is proposing, a solution using tensors.
Okay, define tensor for me, in plain English, as if you're explaining it to a 5-year-old.
I'll try. Think of a single number. That's a point. Now a list of numbers, like a shopping list. That's a vector. It's one-dimensional, a line.
Got it.
Now think of a grid of numbers, like a spreadsheet or a chessboard. That's a matrix. It has 2 dimensions, rows, and columns.
Okay, with you so far.
Stack those spreadsheets on top of each other to make a cube of numbers, like a Rubik's Cube. That's a third-order tensor. Now imagine a hypercube in 4 dimensions, 5 dimensions, that we can't visualize. Those are tensors. They're just multidimensional arrays of data that can hold all of this relational information.
So instead of a flat map of who eats who, we have this multidimensional hypercube that captures all the dinner party dynamics at once. The beetle affects the ant, but only when the herbivore is at this density and the temperature is this high. All that data lives inside the tensor.
Yes, but remember the curse. That cube is too big. It takes up too much memory. So the paper introduces tensor decomposition,
It's breaking the cube.
breaking it down into smaller, much more manageable pieces that contain almost all of the same essential information. It's like data compression. You know how a raw video file from a camera is huge, but you can zip it or compress it to an MP4 and it's much smaller, but you can still watch the movie? Tensor decomposition is the compression algorithm for ecological complexity. The paper discusses a few methods, HOSVD, CPD, but the hero of the story is TTD, tensor train decomposition.
The tensor train. I like that image. Shoot you.
It's the Goldilocks solution. It breaks the massive high-dimensional hypertensor into a linked chain of much smaller 3D tensors. It's stable, meaning the math doesn't glitch out and give you crazy answers. It's efficient, meaning it saves incredible amounts of memory. It reduces the complexity from exponential down to linear. And most importantly, it allows researchers to compute the Jacobian matrix.
The Jacobian matrix, we're back to that. Why do we care so much about the Jacobian? Why is that the holy grail here?
The Jacobian is the community matrix. It represents the local stability of the entire system at a particular moment. Imagine the ecosystem as a ball rolling on a landscape.
Okay.
The landscape is shaped like a bowl, and the ball is sitting at the bottom. The system is stable. If you kick the ball a little bit, say a small drought or a fire, it rolls up the side, but eventually it rolls back down to the bottom. It returns to equilibrium.
Okay, that makes sense. That's stability, resilience.
But if the landscape is shaped like the top of a hill, and the ball is balanced precariously right on the peak, that is an unstable system. If you give it the slightest kick, it doesn't come back. It rolls away further and further. It crashes.
And the Jacobian tells us the shape of the landscape at that point, bowl or hill.
Precisely. Mathematically, you do that by looking at the eigenvalues of the Jacobian matrix. If the real part of the largest eigenvalue is negative, the system is in a bowl. It's stable. It can take a punch and bounce back. If it's positive, the system is on top of a hill. It is unstable. The slightest nudge, and it explodes or collapses.
So let me see if I can put this all together. We use the tensor train to compress the massive, overwhelming complexity of the beetle ant plant web and all its friends. We feed that compressed information into the Jacobian, and the Jacobian calculates these eigenvalues, which essentially give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down on whether the forest survives the next heat wave.
That is the goal. And the paper showed that with this method, they could simulate ecosystems with thousands of species and these complex high-order interactions. That was simply impossible before. It was computationally intractable.
That is absolutely mind-blowing. It feels like we are finally building the telescope we need to see the stars, but for ecology, we can finally start to do the math that matches the reality we see in the field.
It is a huge step. And it brings us back to the synthesis, because now we have all 4 pieces of our puzzle, and when you lay them out on the table together, the picture is both incredibly impressive and, frankly, terrifying.
Let's put them together. Let's connect the dots.
Okay. We have the global context from the IPCC, The theater's heating up, the rainfall is becoming more erratic, the basic physical parameters of life, temperature, water are shifting rapidly and unpredictably.
Then we have the chemical inputs from the nitrogen paper. We are flooding the system with fuel it's not designed to handle. We are acidifying the soil, changing the nutrient balance, favoring the weeds over the specialists. We're essentially force-feeding the planet, and it's getting sick.
Then we have the biotic interactions from the Costa Rica study. We know from direct observation that the system is held together by these fragile, four-step domino chains. If the beetle dies because of the heat, the ant population might change, which changes the herbivore numbers, which changes the plant's survival. It's a delicate Rube Goldberg machine.
And finally, we have the math, the tensors, the tool that lets us finally ask the question. If I turn up the temperature from the IPCC and I double the nitrogen from the VSEC paper, and that kills the beetle from the Dyer paper, does the Jacobian matrix turn positive?
Does the eigenvalue flip? Does the system go from being in a stable bowl to being on an unstable hilltop?
And that's the scary part, isn't it? Because the nitrogen paper said we doubled the inputs. That's a huge change. And the math paper says the complexity of the interaction scales exponentially.
It raises a very provocative thought. We are introducing variables into the equation of nature, nitrogen, carbon, habitat loss, invasive species, at a rate that is linear or even exponential. But the complexity of the system is hyper-exponential. The interactions between all these changes are not just additive, they're multiplicative. They have synergies we can't even imagine.
So are we creating a math problem that nature can't solve? Is that what it comes down to?
Or at least one that nature will solve in a way we really don't like. Nature always balances the equation eventually. The laws of physics and chemistry demand it. But balancing might mean a collapse of the current state and a rapid shift to a new, much simpler state.
Like the heathlands turning into grasslands.
Exactly. The equation was solved, a new stability was found, but we lost the biodiversity. We lost the complexity. We lost the beauty.
That's the aha moment for me in all of this. We look at a forest or a field and we think it's static, like a painting. But it's not. It's actually a high-speed computation running in real time. Every leaf, every ant, every molecule of nitrogen is a variable in this unimaginably complex equation, and we are just throwing random numbers into the computer and hoping it doesn't crash.
And up until now, we didn't even have the mathematical tools to check for stability. Now, with things like tensor train decomposition, we are just starting to get the first blurry look under the hood. We are just beginning to realize how intricate the engine really is. But we are realizing that stability is a mathematical miracle, not a given.
It makes you look at a patch of green differently, doesn't it? Even the lawn.
It absolutely does. It's not just scenery. It's a hyper-complex calculation involving chemistry, predation, symbiosis, and geometry, all keeping itself stable against the forces of chaos.
And our job, as the species with the biggest thumb on the scale, is to stop mashing the keyboard and start learning the code.
Or at least learn how to read the screen before we hit enter again. We need to understand the tensor train before we derail it.
Learn how to read the screen. I like that. We've gone from global warming to tensor calculus, and somehow it all fits together into one coherent, if scary, story.
It's all one web. That's the fundamental lesson. You can't pull on the nitrogen thread over here without shaking the beetle web over there and changing the stability of the whole tensor.
Well, I'm certainly not going to look at a bag of fertilizer or a tiny ant on a leaf the same way ever again.
Nor should you. They're all part of the calculation.
This has been a heavy one, but a really necessary one. We started with the idea that nature is simple. A plus B equals C. We ended with the realization that it's infinitely complex, and that's what makes it both beautiful and incredibly fragile.
And that complexity is its fragility, but is also its resilience, if we give it the space and the stability it needs to work.
That's a good place to leave it. A little bit of hope. To our listener, next time you're outside, just take a look at a plant. Look for an ant. Imagine the nitrogen cycling through the soil. And try to visualize the invisible, multidimensional tensor hypercube holding it all upright.
And maybe wish the Jacobian good luck. It's working hard.
Exactly. Thanks for diving deep with us. Remember, understanding the mechanism is the only way to really understand the headline. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.